Hi everyone, welcome back to latest episode of the Precursive Perspective. It is a sunny slash grey slash rainy day in London. I'm delighted to have Jacqui Wishart on the call today. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, very good, very good. Scottish origins, I understand, to your name.
Yes, last name is definitely Scottish.
Yeah.
That's probably the only part of me that's really Scottish, but
Have you done one of these family tree things where you go back and find out?
yeah, a lot of Southern European, a lot of
Okay.
Italian and Portuguese,
Oh my
more so
good.
than Scottish.
Italian
So,
Portuguese and a Scottish person go into a bar as a is an old joke. Well, I'm delighted to have you on. Excited to talk about some of your experience in growing recurring services in your organization. Just tell folks a little bit about yourself, the scope of your role, and your background, etc. Thanks.
sure. So I have been at Blackbaud for the majority of my career through an acquisition. We started and I've had a lot of different roles at the company. I've started in support, then I did implementation consulting, I did our data conversion services. I played a little role as a product owner for some of the data conversion tools that we built. And in the last 5 or 6 years, I've really specialized in our ongoing services practice. And that is everything for our biggest seven product lines. We have a lot of nonprofit customers, and we have lots of different software that's specialized for the nonprofit industry. And our recurring services are really focused around helping customers use the software better and get more ROI on the investment that they're making with Blackbaud. Our team has scaled pretty dramatically over the last several years, and we're up to 26 delivery folks, which
Hmm.
is huge. We started with 5 or 6, so it's been a
Yeah.
big growth engine for the company over the last 3.5, 4 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like, not many people can pull this off, so I'm really interested to hear your experience. So that with that type of background, you know where all the bodies are buried in the product, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
I've done the product stuff, the data conversion. That's the job that you want to poke your eyes out with. So no, okay, yeah, cool. I like the background. I think for many organizations, like the world of services has been evolving, and like the services portfolio has been evolving. Like recurring services and managed services have been around for a long time. Outsourcing is a good example of that. But I think for many organizations in SaaS and in software, this is still an emerging capability for some. It's much more mature for others. But anyone who's able to get it into double-digit millions is worth listening to. So I'm keen to understand more about like the background to this. So help us understand like what was kind of the background to you guys setting this up?
Yeah, good question. So Blackbaud is a pretty old software company. It's over 40 years old. And as you can imagine, over the years, we've moved from like an on-prem model to more of the SaaS model. And
Hmm.
the company used to have a really big one-time services business. As we would go like physically on site, we would, set up instances, we would do training, we would do all of this sort of thing. And the company has definitely moved more into the SaaS model over the last 10 or so years. And services had to evolve too. So we got a chief customer officer for the first time, um, probably in 2021 or so, who
Okay.
came in from a much more mature company on the SaaS side and said, you have to rethink the customer journey. You can't keep doing the same things that you used to do when you were an on-prem company, when you're going to be growing as a SaaS company. And when you're a domain leader in a SaaS vertical, you have to really be good at your craft. So he revamped a lot of our customer success models. He revamped a lot of the ways that we interact with customers on renewals. And also, one of the things that he really wanted to build in was a recurring service so that we could help customers with the ongoing adoption and make them stickier and make them more likely to renew and kind of deepen that moat of customers who don't want to leave the software because they are really getting the value that we market,
Yep.
instead of kind of abandoning it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Great. Cool. So a little bit of a sort of operating model shift driving kind of the modernization of the post-sale slash gross sale organization, which is always cool to go through.
Yep.
And there is still on-prem out there, people. It does exist.
Yes.
People still go into offices and spend months and years at a time setting it up. So I've talked to a number of businesses that still do that. So yeah, it's still a thing. Um, and so I think something that we talked about when you and I met was like there are certain dynamics that lend themselves to this kind of working, right? And or getting it right. And we talked a lot about like some of the behaviors or the behavioral dynamics of like your customer base.
Yes.
Um, can you tell us a little bit about why that's an important component of designing and shaping the offerings?
Sure. So Blackbaud services the social impact community, which
Mm,
is, nonprofits, government agencies that are doing like nonprofit type work, big like NGOs, small NGOs. But a lot of the organizations we work with have extreme turnover, and they're also not super tech savvy.
okay.
So the average end user that we work with is not an IT person. They typically work at the organization that they're app because they love the mission and they don't necessarily like the technology. The technology is there to help them do their job and measure fundraising or measure the success of their programs, but it's not there. And they're not thinking about it 24 hours a day. They're really thinking about their mission. So I think that our business has been successful partly because we do have a deep domain expertise into the nonprofit sector. Our consultants have, an average of probably 15 years of experience working with the Blackbaud tools and also working with a large variety of nonprofits. And in the last year, we've been able to verticalize their specialty within the nonprofit market. So if you're working with private schools, they fundraise very differently than their counterparts in like a healthcare foundation. So it's been really nice to be not only a partner on the software side, but also looking at the ways that different organizations run operationally and making recommendations, expanding the software, but figuring out the best way to use it to really get a better impact on the dollars that they have to do nonprofit stuff. So all of that administrative overhead, we're trying to make them as efficient as possible so that they can deliver more of the value to their constituents that they need to be doing.
Mm, okay, very interesting. Because I think there's a few things within that, right? Is like, user turnover in any software can be depending on your customer base, could be 5%, 10%, 20%, 50%
Yep.
in a cycle, right? And if it is high, then there's a real need to be, onboarding new people to using your product and therefore the adoption, right? Simply training enablement and adoption, right, is an ongoing thing, I would imagine, in your space, right?
And
Um,
they're lean staffs. You don't have like
mm,
hundreds of people typically using the software at an
right,
organization, like the average everyday small nonprofit. You might have five or six. So you don't
right.
have like a gigantic internal team at the organization who's prepared to like onboard people.
Yeah, no, understood. And and I guess like I mean I love the tenure point. Like we have a really strong tenure at my business as well, actually, not 15 years because we've not been around 15 years. Um that mission piece is that I guess I'm just curious. I didn't plan this question. I'm just like that must be one of the big kind of motivational factors for you and the team is like having an impact on society indirectly, directly, however one might phrase it. But that quite a part of it?
Yeah, a lot of the people who have joined Blackbaud over the years have come directly from nonprofit industries. So it
Yeah.
really is like people are very passionate about helping organizations in their community, but also worldwide in that nonprofit space. So there's certainly I think that that's why Blackbaud has not had the turnover that a lot of other tech companies have had because people truly care about the work that they're doing because it's powering, their communities every day. So it's an
Yep.
interesting group of people who choose to work in that kind of space, and they do truly have a passion for it.
No, I like that. I like that. I love the like it's difficult to fake passion, isn't it? It's like you can't it's not just you put some stuff on a poster on a wall, and it is so. So no, that's very cool. I think the thing about services that some continually not struggle with, but maybe continually have to like evolve is like the value proposition, right? It's like how do we describe the value of what we provide internally with the customer, right? And or with our sales colleagues, with CS, with finance, right? Because this, you're sort of it's the same message but tailored to very different constituents. Um, and so I'm curious within this structure, can you unpack some of the things that you do within it for clients? So like some of the different types of services that you provide.
Yeah. So we have seven different product lines. Not all of them are fundraising. Some of them are accounting or school management. So it varies a little bit by product.
Hmm.
But when we started building this out, I asked the very small consulting team at the time, like, tell me everything that you have ever talked to a customer about. Because our customers oftentimes think that they're, special snowflakes and they do things very uniquely, but they're not that special. Like they're using an the shelf software. So there's certain things that we see repeatedly. And we ended up creating a catalog of all of these different options for each of the products. And if you think about like when you go to a conference and you read the conference description of like what you're going to learn in a topic, we created that basically for our seven products. So it starts very basic with things like how do you optimize, your database structure? How do you create like a data health committee so that your data is clean going forward? And with all of our customers, like we start with like what their end goal is. So having clean data is an aspirational goal that I don't think a lot of people ever fully realize. But the question that we always ask customers is like, what are you going to do with that data when it's clean? And if we can get to the root cause of like why the data isn't clean, is it turnover? Is it because a bunch of people are entering data differently? And what you're going to do with that data at the end of the day, we're able to kind of craft a consulting engagement with them within the package that they purchased to
Okay.
make to like reverse engineer it so that it's very achievable regardless of where they are in their abilities within the software. So for all of our customers, we start with like a what we call a process and solution assessment, and we're basically looking to see like where they think they are, where the data tells us they are, and where they want to go in the future. And we're tailoring the strategy within that catalog that I mentioned for each of those customers. So we say, like, in a year, you want to be creating like a major giving process. So in order to get there, we need to reverse engineer those steps to do that. And this is what it will look like over the course of a year. The
In
package.
that, just sorry, just on that, just before
Yep.
you go. So that example that you give would be a shared outcome, I would assume, across that particular customer profile.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
so the motion, the mechanics of how you get them there is the same, and it's
It
very
is.
prescriptive, but it feels very tailored.
Yes. And it
Okay.
not so like even if you and I both have that same goal, our organizations might look different, like the number of staff that we have, the tenure of that staff, the way that we've set up our database. So the framework is the same, but the actual delivery is very much tailored to the organization. So we
Gotcha.
might use the same, like, this is a tip sheet on how to do XYZ. But when you're working with a consultant, they get to know you, they get to know like all of the challenges that you're having, and it turns it into a very personal engagement. So it's not the same as like a training. Blackbaud has a Blackbaud University training. Everybody gets the exact same language every single time they attend those trainings. It's not tailored to the specific org. With Advisory Plus, which is our service line, the framework is the same, but the delivery is very much tailored to the organization.
Got it. Okay, cool. And so if I play that back to you, you've done your analysis around what are the common things the customers want, the challenges, what they talk about. You've mapped those out, then you've folded them into a menu of sort of prescriptive engagements
Yeah.
that people can, when they consume it, they're like, yep, that's me. Yep,
Yeah.
that's me. Right. Okay, interesting. And then we've sort of talked about how you landed on these types of services. Was there a particular exercise that you did for this? Was it like workshopping over what period of time? Was it just guerrilla style, getting people in a room, thrashing it out? What did you actually do?
Very much the latter. Because these people had full-time jobs and I had a full-time, job on top of building out
Yeah.
the program. So like most organizations, like we operate very leanly and we did not have a ton of time to meaningfully create this. So in the very early days of, AI, we did actually use like ChatGPT to help like take all of the information and organize
Yeah.
it in a way.
Yeah.
And that was groundbreaking because at the time, like it was the first interactions that I had with AI, and I was like, huh, this is actually like helping save time with brainstorming.
Holy shit, look at that table.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. We've all been there.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and it has grown since then. So like every time we release new code or we release new functionality, we are updating that catalog. And the catalog is not designed to be like a vacuum exercise for a customer. Like we don't expect them to go in and like pick the top 5 things that they want to work on
Yeah.
without getting input from us because we want to make sure that like we are partnering with them to tailor the experience. And like you can't start with something advanced if you don't have a good foundation.
Hmm.
What we found is that like the adoption of our products has increased by, 25 or 30% in some areas. The
Hmm.
amount of money that people are processing using the Blackbaud tools has increased. So, and then the renewals for the product have also increased. So we're able to show that like by working one-on-one with a consultant who truly gets to understand the customer, their needs, like their pain points, we're able to drive additional business value for the company.
Okay.
It's been like the first time I feel like that the company really has been able to measure that because we didn't have insight into the value of professional services before this in adoption and we just didn't have the tools and the infrastructure to measure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's easy. Much easier when you've got like a binary, is this client consuming ongoing services versus one that's not? Like that's a
Yeah.
very binary data analysis comparison to do. Um, and all of the things you described are common amongst the companies who do this um well is like a is a difficult term sometimes because I think some people start it and then they see maybe a lot of churn in the outer years, which is something I'm curious to talk to you about and how you think about that, and sometimes need to be accepting of that on the recurring services side of things. If, as you say, the product adoption, right, and the renewal is there. And I think that's just sometimes a little bit misunderstood. It's like, you know, we've created this recurring service, managed service, on demand service, whatever it is. We sold a bunch of it, and then, a fair amount of it churned. And it's like, well, okay, why? And then you'll get various answers. Some of it will be, well, we didn't really have the choreography that you described. So it was kind of like we were selling buckets of hours and then people didn't consume them. We didn't really know who owned that, with the customer. Was it us? Was it the CSM? Was it the AE? So no one was driving that consumption, or simply, yeah, we actually got them to value and we iterated that value. And then it was like, now what? And it was like, well, there actually wasn't that much more to do. So I think that's, and all of those things could be true at the same time, right? That's the other thing about this. But again, if you are in the main driving better gross retention, increased expansion, and as you described, a more intricate understanding or intimate understanding of the value that customers get. I'd love to hear if you've been able to feed that back into the GTM motion, but we can kind of come back to that. Oh, actually, we're about to talk about that now. So, I'll ask that as a follow up to this. So, the next piece is like the positioning of this internally. So if you were giving advice to your peers on how to best position these things with GTM organizations, so sales or CS, try and maybe tailor that answer. Like if you're starting out versus maybe in more mature, I don't know where you want to go, but what's key to the positioning?
Well, one of the things that I have learned over many years of working at Blackbaud is that the things that motivate sales is quota relief and commission. And with recurring services that qualify for ARR, you're able to both relieve quota for them, and you're also able to pay them a commission. So our pricing model includes that. We also don't scope these individually. So the nice thing about the advisory services that we've created is that it's one flat fee, regardless of the customer size or complexity. It's just, it is what it is. And we play the role of averages, on the back end. Um, but for sales, like we partner with sales on an ongoing basis, even to close deals, because sales loves having the consultants who like speak the language of the customer, understand exactly what problems they're describing in real life, not in the version of sales where nothing goes wrong with the software ever, and it's very easy to use, and no human intervention is needed. And we've, created a very strong partnership with sales where PS previously like didn't. Like we had a leader before this who was very much like, you stay in your swim lane, sales will sell what they're going to sell, and then deliver it on the other side. So we've changed that culture to sell
Yeah,
this, and
but
it's been very successful. My manager came from a sales background, and I feel like that has helped too. She didn't come from a services background originally. She came from sales.
mm,
And she certainly, helped with pricing strategy and positioning and the value prop. But a lot of our marketing, a lot of our go-to-market functions were done, between me and my manager and the consultants, because we didn't have like dedicated marketing. We didn't have a dedicated team really for that. So a lot of it is, a lot of the suggestions I have are to just keep going and keep reiterating the value prop of the services that
yep,
we have. And I think like regardless of where things go in the future with AI, like having somebody who can sit down and talk to a customer about the software and how it can be integrated into their day-to-day processes is going to be extremely valuable. Like we're not trying to replace the knowledge base. We're not trying to, you know, have people go to a class where they learn something and then they have to figure out how to apply it in their day-to-day life. Like, and sales likes that. I mean, they like knowing that somebody is going to walk them exactly through how to do what they need to do, because it means that they get fewer escalations 6 months after the sale to say, hey, this didn't quite live up to the expectations that you told me it would.
yep. Yeah, I think there's a number of things in there that are very important. So like number one, as you say, incentives. Incentives do matter. It's a harder uphill battle if you can't get some form of quota relief and or commission for any form of services. I also think that sales gets a bad rap. You mentioned you got, was it nine products?
7.
Seven products, sorry. So you got seven products that you operate across different areas of non-profits. You're dealing with charities, you're dealing with different organizations, right? Most commercial organizations, the sales team is selling multiple products, potentially across different segments and industries, into different buyers who speak different language. And then they've got to learn all that, all the different products and sell services. Like it's quite a high bar. So there's a lot of sales gets thrown under the bus, and there will be sellers that literally don't do themselves any favors in the way that they work with their colleagues and think about this. But as you've described, if you're working with a mature commercial leader, they typically understand very clearly that customers will want to understand what is going to happen when they buy your software, right? In my category, that's probably one of the most intensive conversations that we have. It's much earlier in our sales cycles than maybe in other categories because spoiler alert, we're working with people who run services and they're like, right, how in reality is this going to work if we've got an accelerated timeline, if we've got complexity, like we want to know, and you better have some really good answers because the role of services in that deal earlier stage is helping enable sales to position correctly what's going to happen with your product, how people leverage it. And so those, as you described, having the stories and the very tangible things that they can communicate. Early stage of the sales cycle is very important. And then later stage of the sales cycle, good sellers know it's all about de-risking the deal, right? It's like, this is the team that is going to help to get you where you want to go. And this is the other team, by the way, that works with you on an ongoing basis to deliver value over multiple years. So I think all of that was very well thought out. I also liked the fact that what you are describing is make the shop window easy for um, customers to consume, right? So it's not like we need to do custom scoping on this. It's more buy off the page, and then you've got a prescriptive motion within it. Is that fair?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Cool. So want to talk a little bit about some delivery topics and starting, I think, with some of the KPIs and the metrics. So, what are some of the key metrics that you manage recurring services book against?
So definitely units sold and ARR are two of our big metrics. And then on
As
so
as
delivery
in recurring services, as in services ARR.
services ARR,
Yeah,
yes.
cool. I
We have
call it
about a
SRR,
20%
services recurring revenue.
services recurring revenue. I like that. And we have about we've increased about 20% for the last 2 years.
Okay.
So that that
That's
is
year over year growth.
year-over-year growth.
Yeah.
And uh, the other things on the services side are not that different than a typical like one-time services shop. So things like utilization, we do measure because we have to make sure that our consultants are uh, being utilized, to
Mm.
their fullest potential. But it doesn't impact revenue the same way that a one-time services org does. So like forecasting, when I managed a one-time services team, like you had to forecast as many hours as you could deliver, and it was literally just a guess. Like you didn't know if you really would deliver 20 hours for a customer because they might not be ready for those 20 hours and it would impact revenue. So
Yep.
one of the things I really like about this recurring services model is that we don't have to do that. We know that the revenue is coming in regardless of whether we deliver the hours. But
Mm.
hours are still important. We also
Mm.
don't expose hours to customers as part of this package.
Yep.
So when we are measuring hours, we're measuring it on a to basically measure margin, and we're
Yep.
running at an over 60% margin, which is
Yep.
fantastic for
Yep. It's
for
good.
services. And then we're measuring consumption of the program. So how
Mm.
many of those prescriptive sessions did a customer take? How many of the what
Got
we
it.
call tracks did a customer take? And then we're measuring CSAT, and asking
On the
customers
service or on the account level?
on the service.
The
So
service. Okay.
have the services provided value? Do you feel like you're operating more efficiently than you were before, and things like
Yep.
that?
Okay.
So those are the big KPIs that we have.
Now, on the sort of the prescriptive engagements within it, what do you call that? Do you call that something
Call
like
them sessions. And then
sessions?
the
Okay.
bigger ones that are more like thematic in nature, we call those tracks. And we
So
did that because,
sessions and thematics is track. Okay, cool. Now, just didn't plan this question, but just curious. So over a multi-year time horizon, do
yep,
those sessions and tracks, is there like a multi-year journey versus
yes.
just a one? Yeah, good. There you go. Boom.
And it really depends on where you start. Like if you are like a super
Yeah.
tech savvy shop, which is not the majority of our customers, you might be starting with more like strategic stuff,
Yeah.
and growing into like an AI strategy using the Blackbaud tools.
Mm.
If you're a more cautious shop who maybe just moved from our on-prem version of like Razor's Edge to our web version, you're really starting with the fundamentals of like,
Yeah.
well, is the database structure correct? But our goal is to set you up for long-term success. So, even
Yeah.
using the AI tools in the future, if you have bad data, like those tools aren't going to work. They're not going to give you the results that you want because your data is, your inputs are bad. So,
Are there things that are like, are there regulatory changes that happen in the market that changes like the funding mechanisms, like changes in the law, for example, that happen on a cyclical basis that then determines how they might use your product? Is that
Sometimes, and in
Yeah.
the US right now, like a lot of grants are getting cut by the current
Yeah.
administration, which has caused a lot of funding uncertainty for nonprofits in the United States. The, you know, the idea is, though, that they are able to fundraise more on an individual level. So instead of relying on a grant from a government organization, they might be able to rely more on individual fundraising. And our solutions provide, insights into like who has high net worth and who you should go after um, for prospecting, and being able to surface that information up is really important,
Yeah.
for these organizations that are dealing with funding uncertainty.
Got it. So I would imagine you've got like a customer maturity model in certain segments, right? Of how, for example, their business model might evolve, their customer journey with you guys would evolve. Curious, do you also have like a product maturity model? And what I mean by that is like here is like a beginner with Blackbaud, here's an intermediate, here's an expert, and we migrate them through that over a period of time in a very targeted way. Is that fair? You got both?
Is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm
There you go.
being a SaaS company, like we're constantly releasing new features and new, technology,
Yeah.
new like models for looking at wealth and for donors and stuff. So I feel like, there's never going to be a limit of things that we can work with customers on, which is nice. Like it's not like the
Yeah.
software is the same software as it was 3 years ago, which is how long most of our contracts are, is 3 years. So if you think about like where, we say this a lot of times to customers in the sales process, like where were
Yeah.
you 3 years ago? What were you doing 3 years ago? And where are you today? And
Yeah.
they're, oh, well, a lot of things have changed. They can see that in the future. They'll need the guidance to really use those new tools to make themselves more efficient and more effective at what they do.
That's also a great question to ask your clients in general to remind them of the value that you've driven,
Yes.
right? Because it's very easy to like solve a customer's problem and then they find all new problems that they want to solve and find all new problems with your software to solve. Because I think there's a few things that you've described which I think are really important teaching points for people listening to this. One is, don't just think about your customer journey on a 1 year time horizon. Think about it over 3 years and think about like the operational run state that you want your clients in, right? Like, I'm just going to move this around. Um, think about the operational run state that you want your clients in like 3 years from now. And if you're not sure what that is, look at your biggest, most successful customers and go back 3 years to look at what they were doing then. I think that often it's like the mistake is we got to try and cram everything into like this 1 year time horizon. And actually, customers can't digest that. They're quite happy in evolving their business over time, particularly the ones that kind of know what they're doing. So I think that's one thing is like thinking about how you do that mapping over a multi-year time horizon. And then the other piece that you just highlighted is if you're in a market where, you might look at building like a customer maturity model, but you serve customers across multiple industries. So I was talking with one of our clients that is an applications, they're working with the applications group within big corporate IT teams, but that's across banking, manufacturing, telecoms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So talking about all of that stuff in the industry language is very difficult if you serve 20 industries. But what their team is doing is like really focusing on like the product adoption journey, right? And going from like this intermediate to expert effectively. And it's like, what do we need to do through our recurring services to get people there? And so, for example, it's like, user adoption is step one, and like, have they got everything configured as they need to? Is like step two. And then as you get more advanced, it's like, have they moved from basic reporting to more advanced reporting, and are they making decisions off of this, and are they using it for analytics and things of that ilk? So no, super interesting. So again, I think a load of cool things in there, like unit sales, great. Year over year growth, great. Services recurring revenue, aka services ARR, awesome. Obviously margin, and yeah, I agree, you should be targeting 50, 60. Top tier is probably 80%, which is pretty high, because that's in line with then software gross margins, and it's certainly in line with AI gross margins, probably for some. Um, what does one need to accept in terms of the renewals of these services?
So we're starting our first like big renewal cycle this year. And we've learned a lot. So there are customers who are like, we've gotten as much value as we can. We appreciate everything that you've done. We can't afford it anymore. And we lose them as customer. We have
As a
customers
customer of the service, but not of the product. You keep
of
them
the
as a product
product,
customer.
right? And what's
Yeah.
been cool is that like even the customers that say that, we look at like the amount of dollars that they're processing using our merchant service, and it's like millions of dollars. So the company is way better off today than they were 3 years ago. So even
Yeah.
if we lost the services ARR, we gained, a big chunk of revenue on processing. Um, the other thing that we've worked with is identifying risk early. So from, mitigating renewals to keep our ARR status, we have asked the consultants to go in like a year ahead of renewal to see like who is not engaged, how can we re-engage them, and how can we ensure that we have done everything possible to make sure that they engage. We've noticed that a lot of customers with nonprofit funding uncertainty are citing cost as the biggest reason that they can't
Yeah.
renew. And when we're able to say like you have raised X% more because of the efficiencies that you've gained working with our tool, or
Yeah.
you've made it easier for donors to donate, or whatever. It's easier to say like you can actually afford it. You just have to think about it big picture, and you have to think about the ROI differently.
Yeah.
Um, and we've partnered with our renewals team on like, do we discount a little bit to get a renewal in? Do we,
Yeah.
um, in long term, like maybe we reduce the package a little bit so that instead of
Yeah.
getting 10, sessions a year, they get eight.
Do you do any carve outs? Like you might get, some rev rec towards services versus ARR at all or anything like that?
No, we have not. Yep. So, and sometimes they will use actually the advisory services as a save on the software. So they'll say like, we understand that you're not using it well. We understand that you're, ready to go to market and like look around to see what else is out there. Give us a year to work with our services team to see if we can get you in a better place. And that
Yeah.
has actually proved really successful because we've been able to say, like, this is how you are working today, and this is where you could be in the future if you work with us.
Yeah.
We've been able to save quite a few deals for the company just by working, with a customer on a one-on-one basis. And it's not to
Great.
say that like a CSM wouldn't have the same impact, but a lot of like the burden of figuring out how to use the software better gets put on the customer. And if they're already like frustrated with the company or they're already frustrated with the software, there's no incentive to really do that. There's more incentive to go to market and figure out a different tool.
Now, do you find that you can get people actually to pay for the recurring service on some of those accounts where they
Yeah.
are a churn risk?
Yes,
Of
because the
course you can.
cost to
Yeah.
move to a new software is big. Like
Yeah.
if you think about moving to a whole new CRM, I mean, it could be
Yeah.
tens of thousands to $100,000.
Yeah, I
And
agree. I wouldn't throw it in for people listening. I wouldn't throw it in. Like a lot of people just they get really scared about charging for a managed service, even to save a renewal. There's this like perception that it's like no one is going to pay us if they're having issues. And like this comes back to the ability to get on a call. Like I've been on some calls like with customers where they're like, we're not getting as much value as we want. And it's like, okay, what's that? What are you not getting value on? This, and this. Okay, cool. What are you getting value on? Oh, well, this, and this. To your
yeah,
point, right? It's like, okay, well, on the scale, where are we? Are we up or are we like really down? Right? It's like, well, actually, yeah, fair. You're okay, cool. So part of what we need to bring to the table is you need our people, right? Like that's the message. And there's actually, a psychological reassurance that client's going to get that like, no, I'm going to put, you know, Bob or Susan, it's always Bob and Susan in my examples, they always work together, in with you to get this. And they're going to be committed on your account, for however you want to position the time that they're spending with them. Like that shows investment. Like that shows that we put customers first and actually mean it. So no, I like to hear that you can get the charge in. So don't give it away at renewal. Um, so last last question, and there's a couple of or there's a couple of forks to this question. So the challenges in delivering this stuff, I think, you've talked a lot about kind of the structure, there's thought in that, there's this prescriptive motion. A lot of folks struggle with some of the capacity planning, the value realization, particularly the documentation of the value realization. Um, oh, something popped up on my screen here. I don't know why. So tell us about some of the challenges. Oh, it's Claude. Claude has just popped up and gone, "Good afternoon, JC. You're not talking to me enough." Wow, that's hilarious. So what are some of the challenges in delivering these services?
All right. So when we started with this model, we actually had a predecessor to this model in retainer services, which is basically like you buy 5 hours a month for 12 months.
Yeah.
And they tried to combine the implementation teams and just like tack on these retainer engagements. And the mindset that you have to have in delivering a recurring service is very different than the mindset you have in delivering an implementation. Implementation, you're taking nothing and building something. Recurring services, you are really invested in the customer's like long-term journey, and you have to think about it differently. So we did have a carve out of the folks that were thinking more long-term, but they were still thinking in hours, and they were still
Yeah.
thinking like, this takes me 2 hours today. They weren't thinking like, how do I do this in 1 hour? Because I'm going to create repeatable, materials that I can recycle over the time. Um, so when we, start growing this team and building this team, it was actually easier to take people who were not consultants within the company and put them into this role than it was to take somebody from implementation and try to like retrain their brain into thinking a long-term subscription model, which if you asked me this 4 years ago, I would have said like, no, of course we're going to hire from implementation because they're used to consulting. But we've actually had a lot of success in pulling people from other areas like customer success management or from who have had like prior industry experience or from
Yep.
our training team who have had prior industry experience. And that was a misconception that I had. Also, when you're thinking about capacity planning, it's all on hours. So we're not necessarily like delivering hours in hours form to the customer, but behind the scenes, like all of the accounting and all of the capacity planning is done through hours. So I
Mm,
partnered with our finance team, to kind of refine a model where like if we assume that we're going to use up 70% of the hours to deliver 100% of the deliverables, what does that look like from a capacity model? And I feel pretty strongly that these services like can't be outsourced to a service delivery partner, can't be offshored at this point, and that we do really have to have people with deep domain expertise in order to
mm,
deliver them. And the
mm,
business has been a little bit like iffy on that because our overall strategy is like send things to partners, send things to offshore teams in order to save cost. But I think when you don't have the pressure of like every billable hour is driving revenue, you have a little bit of relief in that.
mm,
And then the mindset shift for even the consultants to think about like renewal, like we don't want to talk about this as a project. We want to talk about it as an engagement. So that engagement never ends. Like you're in year 3 of the engagement, you're planning year 4. You're not like, let's finish up and get everything we can do by the end of year 3 with the intention of you not renewing. Like we want them to be thinking, what are you going to do in year 4, year 5, year 6? So that the customer can see that there is still a path forward. Um,
mm.
and then on
Yeah, I like that.
the value realization side, so we've been able to, we have a couple of like very techie people in our managed services org who have been able to pull data, from Databricks, from our
Hmm.
data platform to like prove the ROI. And that's been really cool because previously, like, we had no insight into any of that.
Mm,
Able to do that. And then like, we have a lot of like non-metricy stories of like customers who have come to us in crisis and we've been able to help them, revamp a process or we've been able to help them through, turnover or staffing challenges to like get the next round of people up and running and really adopting the solution. So
mm. Yep.
um it's
I
been
like, I like, yeah, I
yeah,
like there's a lot of that.
an evolution for sure. But I think that there's still a lot more to do. Like I think potentially down market offers for Blackbaud could be interesting with some of our really small nonprofits who may not have the budget even for what we're charging, but who still need the help and are probably at more risk for leaving for a different, competitor solution because it's a lot cheaper to move for them because they're not, using it for everything that they could be using it for.
Yeah. And that's where you want to, it's like a lot of these recurring services motions are playbooks. They're ways of working that if you can then figure out, is there a stripped back version of that or a version of that that a different person, like you mentioned, bringing in a CSM or leveraging a support person. So, the kind of the motions that you go through, like you may have a version of that you have in like your enterprise, your mid-market segment, the down market, you couldn't put the person on, but some of the fundamentals of the playbook, what are they? And is there a way that we can deliver that through CS with an enablement type of motion? It's not going to be exactly the same, but
Right.
does it get you part of the way there? And by the way, with AI and your ability to now produce assets much more quickly than you could do in the past, this is something that we're doing constantly with Claude, is like on an account by account basis, we're able to produce assets that coach the customer, visualize data points that they're going to want, which previously you would have needed to do in a demo org or talk them through it, and you can bang it all in Claude and it spits it all out in your brand and this type of stuff. Like there's a lot of things that the services engagement motion that you're describing can be turned into playbooks and used elsewhere. I also like we've really tuned into like you can package things up. Like if you've got the buy-in of other functions, we've got recurring services offerings where TAM's involved, a services person's involved, support person's involved. They're all tracking time against that engagement, and the time is planned against that engagement, but they're not necessarily in the managed services team, right? They're just contributing to it. We use it as a source of learning and development for like members of the support team who are highly technically capable. And so, we've scoped something with a client at the moment, and it's like there's a mixture of the TAM, a services person, a support person, and actually a partner, because the partner's got expertise on building a Slack app that we want to build for this particular customer, right? Where they'll integrate Precursive more with Slack. And so that's all wrapped up, and then is on our paper. So I think, the ability to be, I think it's a part of what has made you successful, in my opinion, is that you're creative, right?
Yeah.
And you've got an imagination. So well done for that. I mean, I don't mean that facetiously, but it's true, right? You've got to have this creativity. I think the thing about the capacity modeling is this, you've mapped out these engagements, but then the thing to remember is, like you said, is before we just had like, we were thinking in like buckets or little bits of hours, which is very bitty and people don't plan. And then it's all a bit messy on who's working with what. If you can, I like the engagements, not projects, but if you can think about mini projects within the engagements, of like you've got this set of things that we do. So like you mentioned, we've got this kickoff, this strategy session, then we've got this session, then we've got this session. That might be 4 sessions that are 2 hours a time. That's 8 hours, and we do that over 2 weeks. We do 2 of them, it's 16 hours over 4 weeks, right? And so then you've got a capacity model where you can do the peanut butter spreading, because you're not necessarily don't care really about what day it happens on, but you can do the peanut butter spreading. You can turn those into templates in your PSA, which means you can start doing some actual kind of resourcing and capacity planning and that type of thing. So no, I think you've done phenomenally well. And this is like a 10 million plus business, right?
Yeah, we're at 12.5 million ARR this year. So
Boom. There you go. From
great.
zero. Well done.
From
Awesome. Very good. Over how many years have you been doing this?
our first one sold in 2022. So
Nice. Awesome. Awesome. Well, your business is lucky to have you. Thank you ever so much for joining and preparing. Do you enjoy it?
yes, it was great. Thank you so much.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you ever so much. And have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.